Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Titan submersible. What happened in the final hours before implosion? Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. At approximately 9:47 in the morning, on June 18, 2023, United States Navy hydroacoustic sensors detected an acoustic signature in the North Atlantic consistent with an implosion. The signal was logged, analyzed, and classified. The Navy did not immediately tell the outside world what it had heard. For the next 4 days, the families of 5 men waited, while the world watched a search and rescue operation unfold on live television. A search that the Navy already had strong reason to believe was searching for debris, not survivors. The Titan submersible had been built by Ocean Gate, a private company whose CEO, Stockton Rush, had dismissed conventional submersible safety certification as bureaucratic thinking that stifled innovation. He had used a carbon fiber cylinder as the main pressure hull, an approach no certified deep-sea submersible had ever used, and had fired the director of marine operations, who filed an internal safety warning about it. The vessel had made 13 previous dives to Titanic depth. On the 14th, it did not come back. Whether anyone aboard knew what was about to happen remains unknown. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the world of history's most enduring unsolved crimes, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Amateur investigation of cold cases has undergone a revolution in the digital age. What once required physical access to evidence rooms, courthouse archives, and retired detectives now requires, in many cases, only an internet connection and a willingness to spend several hundred hours reading. Online communities dedicated to specific cases have grown to tens of thousands of members, coordinating the analysis of evidence across continents and time zones, cross-referencing witness accounts, and applying analytical frameworks drawn from criminology, forensic accounting, and intelligence analysis. This democratization of investigation has produced real results. Amateur researchers have identified previously overlooked evidence in multiple high-profile cases. Citizen DNA investigations have generated viable leads that professional investigators subsequently pursued. Open-source intelligence techniques, originally developed for geopolitical analysis, have been applied to cold cases with unexpected success, identifying locations from historical photographs, tracking financial transactions through public records, and mapping suspect movements through odd documents. But amateur investigation has also produced harm. Innocent people have been named online as suspects by communities whose enthusiasm outran their evidence. Families of victims have been subjected to intrusive and sometimes harassing contact from self-appointed investigators. Evidence has been disturbed by unauthorized site visits. The power of collective human intelligence, when applied to genuine mystery, is remarkable. The question is whether it can be channeled in ways that help rather than harm the living people caught in the blast radius of historical crimes. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter, the core evidence surrounding the Titan submersible. What happened in the final hours before implosion is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Ocean Gate Titan submersible imploded on June 18, 2023, during its descent toward the RMS Titanic wreck at approximately 3,800 meters depth in the North Atlantic. All 5 people aboard were killed. Stockton Rush, Ocean Gate CEO and pilot; Paul Henry Nargeolet, French maritime expert; Hamish Harding, British businessman; and Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman Dawood, Pakistani-British family. The implosion was essentially instantaneous. The occupants would have had no warning. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the U.S. Navy's hydroacoustic monitoring system detected an acoustic signature consistent with an underwater implosion at the approximate time and location of the Titan's descent on June 18. This information was shared with the U.S. Coast Guard and the Search Command, but was not publicly disclosed during the 4-day search operation, which continued until debris was found by a remotely operated vehicle near the Titanic bow on June 22. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The Titan's pressure hull was a carbon fiber cylinder approximately 3.8 meters long and 1.4 meters in diameter, rated to 4,000 meters. Carbon fiber composites are strong in tension, but can suffer delamination and microcracking under repeated compressive loading, a behavior fundamentally different from the titanium and steel used in all certified deep-diving submersibles. Each round-trip dive subjected the hull to cyclic pressure loading that can accumulate damage invisible to visual inspection. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, David Lockridge, Ocean Gate's Director of Marine Operations, filed an internal report in January 2018 documenting safety concerns about the Titan's carbon fiber hull, specifically citing acoustic analysis that showed the hull had signs of delamination. Ocean Gate responded by terminating Lockridge's employment and filing a counter-lawsuit alleging breach of contract. Lockridge's safety concerns were subsequently made public during legal proceedings. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of, in 2018, the Marine Technology Society wrote an open letter to Ocean Gate expressing concern that the company planned to operate a manned submersible to Titanic depth without classification by a recognized marine safety authority. The letter, signed by representatives of multiple submersible operators and manufacturers, warned that an unclassified experimental submersible operating at extreme depth posed significant safety risks. Ocean Gate proceeded with its dive program. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The Titan had completed 13 dives to the vicinity of the Titanic wreck prior to its final mission. Carbon fiber pressure vessel fatigue is cumulative. Each pressure cycle at operating depth introduces stress that can propagate existing micro-defects. Unlike metallic hulls, composite materials do not exhibit the same predictable work hardening and crack propagation behavior that allows fatigue life to be modeled with engineering confidence, making the Titan's actual remaining fatigue life on its 14th dive unknown. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Titan submersible, what happened in the final hours before implosion. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation, proposed by researchers, holds that cyclic fatigue failure of the carbon fiber hull caused the implosion. The hull accumulated damage through 13 previous deep dives and failed catastrophically on the 14th as a pre-existing delamination or micro-crack propagated under compressive loading. This is the primary mechanism identified by the U.S. Coast Guard Marine Board of Investigation and is supported by Lockridge's 2018 internal report documenting acoustic evidence of existing hull delamination before the fatal dive. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that a manufacturing defect or material flaw in the carbon fiber cylinder, present from initial construction, was the locus of failure, not cumulative dive fatigue, but a structural weakness that was always present and grew critical size over the dive program. This is not a competing theory so much as a refinement of the fatigue hypothesis, but it has implications for whether the vessel should have passed any meaningful pre-dive inspection at any point in its operational life. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Titan submersible, what happened in the final hours before implosion, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence, as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the U.S. Coast Guard Marine Board of Investigation, which published its preliminary findings in 2024, identified carbon fiber hull fatigue failure as the most probable cause of the Titan implosion. The investigation reviewed OceanGate's engineering records, Lockridge's 2018 internal safety report, the acoustic data showing progressive hull cracking noise on previous dives, and the debris field geometry near the Titanic, which was consistent with a catastrophic implosion rather than a controlled flooding event. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the debris recovered from the seafloor near the Titanic wreck included fragments of the carbon fiber cylinder hull consistent with catastrophic compression failure, both titanium end cap assemblies partially intact, and components of the vessel's interior all distributed in a pattern consistent with an instantaneous implosion at depth. No evidence of fire, flooding through a seal failure, or other alternative failure modes was identified in the recovered debris. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed Lockridge's 2018 internal report, which became a public document through legal proceedings before the accident, specified that acoustic emission testing of the hull had identified signs of delamination in the carbon fiber laminate. This pre-accident documentation of the specific failure mode that destroyed the vessel 5 years later is the single most significant piece of pre-accident evidence and directly implicates OceanGate's decision to continue operations after receiving that report. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Titan submersible, what happened in the final hours before implosion. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. OceanGate suspended all operations following the Titan implosion. The U.S. Coast Guard Marine Board of Investigation published findings in 2024, concluding that carbon fiber hull fatigue failure was the most probable cause. The disaster exposed a specific regulatory gap. Deep-sea tourist submersibles operated in international waters were not subject to mandatory classification by any recognized marine safety authority, and OceanGate had explicitly chosen not to pursue voluntary classification. The maritime industry and regulators began reviewing certification requirements for commercial crewed submersibles. The Titan case is now used in engineering education as a case study in how safety culture failures, dismissing expert warnings, prioritizing innovation over certification, and retaliating against internal safety concerns compound to produce catastrophic outcomes. All 5 victims are memorialized. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Titan submersible. What happened in the final hours before implosion, from the historical record through the physical evidence across the competing theories and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Titan submersible ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.